doubt. A sinful soul, I come to him, he will not cast me out. I need no other evidence, I need no other plea. It is enough that Jesus died and again for me. My soul is resting on the word, the living word of God. Salvation in my Savior's name, salvation through his blood. I need no other evidence, I need no other plea. It is enough that Jesus died and rose again for me. The great physician heals the sick, the lost he came to save. For me his precious blood he shed, for me his life he gave. I need no other evidence, I need no other plea. It is enough that Jesus died and rose again for me.
Shall we bow our heads and have a word of prayer, and then we'll be seated for the symposium. Let's bow our heads. Father in heaven, we ask for your presence to be with us just now as we listen, as we learn. Please give us your spirit. We thank you for hearing and answering this prayer. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.
Welcome everyone to the second Weimar Symposium. I confess we are in the early stages of organizing good symposium. But we had a blast last year, and we're going to continue that tradition this year. We have a wonderful program packed. We have some good faculty presentations and student presentations. And then we're going to have a scholarly faculty recital, as you can see in the bulletin, if you're able to pick one. It's also in the newsletter I sent out. We've been announcing about this for a month, or more than a month, about this scholarly thing, and it's important every student gets every year at least one scholarly meeting. Either you go to a research symposium outside or on the campus, and that's what we're trying to do. It's not a meaningless activity. Sometimes we need to be educated, and we are trying to do that. May the Lord lead us in this program and bless this program. I'm so nice to see Mr. Brad Heisler there, fellow physicist. He wears so many hats. He's a lawyer, physicist, or an engineer. He does a wonderful job in teaching physics. I had an opportunity to co-teach along with him. I survived that 3 weeks. All right, so if you see in the poster and bulletin, it said, "Can human achieve eagle vision?" Or in other words, the title, "Achieving Supernormal Vision," right? That may need possessing supernormal spirit, right? Am I going to be on the spiritualism side? No. It's usually about 45-minute presentation. I'm going to congest this to about 20-25 because we have a long list of activities, and I want to give them respect and give them the time. So let's dive in. When we talk about normal, first let's understand what normal vision is before we go into supernormal vision. Normal vision, when we go into the eye clinic, the optometrist would sit you on this phoropter, clinical phoropter, and dial those lenses, the numbers. You hear those click, 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 and then they give you a prescription. So we always get into this, let me get my point here. So you see that 20/20, we always use the word 20/20, and we are happy with that spectacles. We do a few more dialings there before he prescribes. But what about eagle? Because that's in the title, so I have to say something about it. Eagle vision, right? It's about 8 to 10 times better vision, or the visual acuity, we call visual acuity. It's about 10 times, 8 to 10 times better than human. So we say our normal vision is 20/20. Eagle's vision is far better. It can look at a moving mouse or a creature from about 2-3 kilometers, right? 4 kilometers. They can spot and they can focus on it and take it down. So if you're that good, probably you wouldn't have to go to class. You'll be in your dorm, open the window, and watch Dr. Celestine's lecture. And then when he asked why you're not in the class, and he said, no, I was attending your classroom in a comfortable position from my dorm room. But there are two things for us we need in order to achieve super normal human vision. Those are the things we're going to look at. Okay? Let's say you are given that project. Like, our vision is not enough. We need to better this. Okay? We need to challenge the question. The first is, in the eye, we have optics, right? We have front optics. We call it the optics of the eye. We have cornea. We have crystalline lens. And then we have vitreous humor. It's a large vacuum. It's like the western part of Texas, like just a lot of fluid there. And then you have the important screen, which we call as retina. It has retinal layers where image is formed. Okay? So let's get this basic optics here. If I'm using this lens to view this point object, right? I'm just looking at a dot. Okay? You take a pen and put a dot on a paper, and you use a lens to look through, a converging lens to look, and you want to form an image of that object. Okay, point object. Let's say if it is an ideal, a perfect lens, you would form a point image, right? If your point is about 1 millimeter or 1 micron in diameter, you would have an image of 1 millimeter in diameter. Exactly. We call it 1:1, right? Do you understand? 1:1. But that's not the usual case in optics. Anything optics you touch has some defects. We call aberrations, okay? Optical aberrations. So you were trying to image this point object, but it ended up not being a point image, but an aberrated image. It's what we call as point spread image. It's not a point image anymore. As you can see, there is a decent amount of spread. And that spread is because of not the object. Okay, it's not the object or the medium, which is air in this case, but it's the optics. Okay, the optics causes these aberrations. So let's say we have optics in the eye. As I said, we have cornea here, we have crystalline lens here. They all have refractive index. They are a refractive medium. Okay, so they bend the light, they refract the light. So let's say a light coming out from the eye, you don't have your own light. If you put in the light, that light will reflect back, okay? So when the light reflects back, if it's your eye is a perfect eye, your wavefront will look flat like that, all right? It's like plane, okay? Flat wavefront. A wave coming out, you take a snap of it, that's a wavefront, right? You get a flat one. But that's not the case. When the light comes off, it will be like this. Will be aberrated, right? It will be going on, bending in all different directions because of the deformities our optics has. And instead of flat wavefront, you will have this distorted wavefront, okay? Now it looks ugly on here, but when you simulate it here, you look at this, these are the aberration profile of the light as it comes out, okay? You look, they are pretty, right? Always the aberrations, sometimes the mistakes and sins, all of that we do, look, it's pretty good. Like, look at that. I would rather have this aberration and look at it. right? That's what you would feel. But we need to correct this. You can see this is what happens. We call it second order aberrations, where you go into optometrist's office. That's what they correct you. They correct you defocus, which is the myopia or hypermetropia, and then the two sides are the cylinder or the astigmatism, that the axis, right? Sometimes the light is skewed in particular directions, which they will correct. But there are tons of other aberrations, as I shown in this previous picture. There are tons of other aberrations which are not corrected at the optometrist office or in any ophthalmology clinic. So the question now, we need to probably correct this eye's optics before we can understand if we can get to supernormal vision. We are talking about not getting normal vision, right, when you correct. But the question is one step further about supernormal vision. So I worked on this technology. It's called as adaptive optics. I didn't invent them, but I worked on this in the research lab at the Medical College of Wisconsin a few years ago, which is called as adaptive optics, which the astronomers use to be able to see the stars, okay? Because if you see from here, you may see one light, but if you are able to use this technology, you'll be able to separate those stars separately, okay? So we're going to use this adaptive optics. So first what we need to know is that how much aberrations or optical defects my eye has. So the first one is about measuring. The second one is about how do I correct for those aberrations so that my vision can be perfect, okay? Or within the quotes, perfect, okay? So this is my schematic of my system. So what I need a light to go in because my eye cannot by itself send light out. I need to put in a light, so I turn on a laser beam. As you can see, it goes in, right? A laser beam goes into the eye, all right? These are permitted level of laser, okay? We do all those calculations before putting the laser. It's not like you take a pointer and shine. Don't try this experiment in your dorms, okay? And then the light reflects back from the fundus, from the retina, back, okay? It travels through all those optical systems here, lenses, and reaches the sensor. The sensor here, it says wavefront sensor. The sensor measures the optical defects as the wavefront exited your eye, okay? It measures. It takes the measurement about how much myopia you have and other aberrations. So once you know the data, now what can you do? The wavefront sensor can only measure, it can only point to what aberrations you have, it cannot correct, right? It's like the law of God. Its job is to point. It measures, quantifies. Thou shalt not. You have this problem, all right? And then the second one, I have a system here. It's called wavefront correction. This is a very unique mirror. It's called wavefront corrector. It's also called as deformable mirror. This mirror is such that, very delicate mirror, it can take the shape of an aberrated wavefront. You see that? That red aberrated wavefront, right? It carries all the defects of my eye as it exits. It is like wiggly. It's like this bulletin. It's like this. This is my wavefront as it comes out of my eye, okay? Sorry, Weimar Church. It comes out of the eye like this. So this deformable mirror that I have here takes the shape of this defective wavefront mirror, and when it reflects off that mirror, it gives a flat wavefront here. Okay? It takes the shape of the defective wavefront and reflects a flat wavefront. So it is like this. The wavefront here is, as you can see, so you see that aberrated become flat there on the image here, right? The same thing with the spread image here. You can see that it becomes a point image, because this deformable mirror took the shape of that defective wavefront and corrected for the defect in the eye, okay? And so you get the point image. if you were to look at a point object. Even though the schematic looks good, this is the experiment setup I used on various subjects. And you see, when we look through our retinal camera, eye fundus camera we call in the eye clinic, when you go for an annual check, they put a light inside, and this is what we could see, fundus, right? You need this fovea there. Without fovea, you cannot read anything. That's what we call central vision. Without fovea and macula, you cannot read or look at anybody. That's the central vision, and rest of them give you the peripheral vision. But you cannot image beyond this. But using this adaptive optics technology, I can go look into the photoreceptors, ganglion cells, bipolar cells, horizontal cells, amacrine cells. All the neurological ones that are present at the retina. So this is the technology when it's off, and then I turn it on, I can see the photoreceptors. Okay? This is the fundus, but when I turn it on, I can look at this. The reason I can see this photoreceptors is because I can, what does the deformed mirror do? It corrects for the optical defects. It compensates that. So it allows for me to go and image these deeper layers. So here is some image where you can see that this camera looks at the photoreceptors, as you can see. You can also see the blood flow there, and can penetrate through a few more layers. You can see the blood flow in the capillaries and main vessel. You can even see, if you watch closely, the breathing as you breathe, the velocity. So the individual, you can also see individual red RBCs there, red blood cells. The other thing you can also use, we used in this technology, is to measure the vascular in terms of the thickness. People who have hypertension, it reduces like this. Okay, so it's about 80 microns here. The normal one is about 90 microns. The thing is that this technology, you can go back to the same one cone photoreceptor, singular cell resolution. You can go back to that one particular cell, even though we have about 6 million cone photoreceptors and about 120 rod photoreceptors. It allows you to find that particular region, to be able to go treat. The other understanding the system gave is for the first time, we were able to see that we are trichromats. We were able to identify which cone photoreceptor is sensitive for red, green, or blue. Okay? We are all in general trichromats. But usually in population, about 3% of them, especially men, are dichromats. Okay? Maybe with the stat, there should be at least 3 or 4 of you here. So you see that one of the other understanding we got was the trichromats, the red, green, and blue, is not the same quantity in each person. It varies from person to person, but even though their color vision, their visual performance looks the same, it's very identical when you do color vision. So it's amazing. One key fact, females, some of them could be tetrachromats. They would have 4 pigments. They would have an additional red pigment that gives them an additional several skew. That's why they are in clothing store. Boys, men, getting ready for to go. You should know if she is trichromat or tetrachromat, because you'll be frustrated standing out there. It's like, how long can I stand here outside this clothing store? Because you have more skew. She can differentiate more colors there. All right? The other aspect of this technology is that, I said the wavefront sensor measures your defect. The second part is the wavefront corrector, right? So instead of wavefront corrector, I measure the defect you have and fit it into femtosecond laser. That's what we call LASIK. Okay? And the first part of the instrument, which you call is the wavefront sensor, I have it right there in the physics lab. I hid it in a box. I couldn't open it the 2 years because of all the good problems you bring. All right, number 2. So the first one is the optics of the eye. We looked at it, right? The second one is, so what is the anatomy of the eye? All right, anatomy of the eye. One is the optics of the eye, the other one is anatomy of the eye. So let's look at this one. This is simulation of a primate central fovea. Okay, primate central fovea is about 5 degrees from fovea. You cannot exactly image fovea because the foveal pit, it's a pit, so it's very hard to image. So we 0.5 degrees from the fovea. let's say I ask this creature to look at a grating like this. So that whatever you look at, that image will be on the retina, right? That'll be on the screen. So let's see, that's like that, okay? So now I'm going to increase what we call as frequency, okay? The spatial frequency. I'm going to add more lines there, what we call as grating, okay? So look at that. You're still able to see that primate's retina, right? You're still able to resolve that. Keep looking at it. You're still able to resolve that. Now, you still can. Now, it's getting a little harder, but you still can resolve. It's pretty tight, but now look at the changes. You cannot resolve anymore. Now you see something else is forming. This is what we call as aliasing. You know, this generation may not know, but if Mr. Heisler, myself, you know, Dr. Opia thinks he's young, but he also would know. When you look at this computer, there is an aliasing in the screen. I don't know how many of you used to, probably Marian remembers that in those days with cathode ray, big TVs, you would see this aliasing. When your image is higher resolution than the chip, this is what will happen. So you see aliasing, it's a kind of zebra crossing. It gets worse and worse as you go increase. So you may have a 10K TV, but it doesn't matter as long as your camera behind your camera chip is not made for that. Okay? You can have a great video camera, but if you don't have a proper, so it's very important for us to understand there is a limit, what we call as a Nyquist limit. That's the limit in which human eye can resolve. So what does it say? What does it mean? We have neurological limitation. We have optical limitation. So we need to keep that in mind as we think about can we get a supernormal vision. But there's one idea here. So we talked about eagle's vision, like from 3 kilometers. Let's say we are about 2 miles, 3 kilometers from the Statue of Liberty on a boat, and you're trying to view this, and this is the normal 3 millimeter pupil. Okay, we know that our pupil size change, right? Our pupil size change during the daytime, it's about 3 to 4, and in the nighttime it opens up to 7 or 8 millimeters, so it allows more photons in. So you can see that if you're about 3 kilometers from the place, this is how blurrier that statue will look to you. And then if I correct you for that normal vision, using the technology I said, it gets better, right? It gets better. But instead of 3 millimeter, okay, the 3 millimeter is very small, right? Now, what if I open this to 8 millimeters? Okay, that's the pupil size you would have if it is completely dark, right? Opens up, your iris opens up because you need to allow, that's what happens if you get into a dark place like a movie theater. How many of you been there? It's a good point. Are you SAC? Are you looking at it SAC? No? All right. Corrected 8 millimeter pupil. But the problem we have is we cannot walk around with 8 millimeter pupil. If somebody walks around with 8 millimeter pupil, you know why? Tristan, you know that. Tell me. Why? You are in my class. If you're 8 millimeter pupil during the daytime, that means that person is dilated, probably went to an eye clinic, or he went to another clinic to get, no? Yeah, he's drugged. So it opens up to 8 millimeter. But if you're 8 millimeter, you know that when you're dilated, when you went to an optometrist clinic and have you dilated, you can't read. It becomes blurrier. Have you noticed that? You can't drive, you can't. So if you have 8 millimeter pupil, it becomes blurrier. Let's say if you have 8 millimeter pupil, but I correct for all your aberrations using this adaptive optics technology, then you can be better than the normal vision. Okay? But the problem is you can better the optics, you can sometimes even bypass the optics, but the neurological setup we have, the photoreceptor setup, is very limited. That means the number of cells you have is limited to resolve something which is much finer. Okay? So there is no way we can better our visual system. We say 20/20 vision. The human limit is 20 by 10, 20/10. That means that's much superior than 2020. We have both optical and anatomical limitations to vision. But there is one possibility. I just found this is fascinating. We can have supernormal vision. It says, the nearer we come to Jesus, the more clear we discern the purity of his character, and more clearly shall we see who? Jesus. I think that's where we need supernormal vision. Our supernormal vision should be to see Jesus. Okay? So when we get when we get nearer to Jesus, we can see with a higher resolution, what our defects are. What are the changes I need, modifications I need, and how I can walk with God. You know, they always say about the inhabitants, the sinless planet, right? Sinless worlds. And always stress that they are watching us. We are in the middle of great contrast. They are watching us. It's about the character, right? And it says, through unending ages, the inhabitants of sinless world shall what? Behold. And you look at the meaning for that. I don't know what it means, but the meaning is to see, to watch intently, right? So they are watching us. I don't know if they have a supernormal vision that they are several light years away, somewhere in a planet, can watch us. We don't know. But we'll learn about it as we see that repeated words that Ellen White used, the sinless inhabitants of other worlds beheld. Okay? They watched us. I don't know if they have a flash news CNN in their planet. I don't know how they watched, but it says they beheld. It repeatedly keeps coming back. I'll leave you with this promise that if you only trust in the Lord, we'll find new strength and will soar high on wings like eagle. They will not run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Let's pray for a supernormal vision. It means to get closer to Christ. Thank you. My time is up. Now I invite Dr. Harris.
Is this working? Yes. Now it's time for our faculty presentations, and our first presentation will be by Dr. Paul Ratsara. The title of his presentation is How to Solve the Discrepancy Between What God Has Promised and What It Is.
Good afternoon to all. I really enjoyed that presentation. The first one was quite complicated to follow, but the lessons is very powerful indeed, and I need to learn more about that. Okay, here we go. Yeah, we concluded with the spiritual tone, and we'll just continue with that. I enjoyed, let me see my time. We have to, okay, here. All right, the time is here. I really enjoyed the presentation that we have just listened to and watched. And I pray that God will continue to use the knowledge that God has given us to help us to grow even spiritually. The presentations that I am going to present today is about this title, How to Solve the Discrepancy Between What God Has Promised and What It Is. A revival and reformation of the missing ingredients. As you can see, I corrected a little bit my degree there in the bulletin. It is THD instead of PhD. So, we have a problem. In the end of time, the promise of the outpouring of the Holy Spirit during the latter rain is to be expected and prepared for. The experience of the early church is to be repeated in much greater power. But we have, yes, we are grateful for the progress of the Free Angels messages around the world. Nevertheless, the existing reality is stark contrast to what God has promised. So, this is the problem. We see in the Bible and in the spirit of prophecy, the book of Acts. You see the early church. You see the great power there. And we read also in the Bible and the spirit of prophecy what it should be. But the reality is different. What we read in the book of Acts, we don't see them now. But it has been promised. In the Colossians chapter 1, verse 23, it is written that in one generation, the early church preached the gospel. Just one generation from 12 people, 120 people, and they covered the entire globe then known. And Sister White talks about this. To every nation under heaven, the gospel was carried in a single generation. So that happened then. And it is promised that these scenes are to be repeated and with greater power. So you can see the promise here. We have the great things of the book of Acts, of the early church, and then the promise is it will be repeated but with greater power. And it is even promised that it will be 10 times the power. 10 times. It is not just double what we see in the book of Acts. It will be 10 times. And 10 is the minimum figure in the Bible. So it will be multiple times. That was the promise. And it will be with great power. It is not just numerical growth, but it is also of power. God's power, the miracles, the healing, and all of this, 10 times more than they experience in the book of Acts. So the question asked by the Ellen G. White in the book Desire of Ages, the gospel still possesses the same power, and why should we not today witness the same results? So that is the question. And I've been studying this for about 30 years. He said, why is it? Study the Bible, the spirit of prophecy, on my knees. He said, why is it? And I would like just to present you some of the findings. I need about a week to present this, but I will just summarize it. So I hope that this will help a little bit our study in answering these questions. Why is it that we don't witness today the same results? So, the first answer to that is that our understanding of the characteristic of our identities of the remnant church is true, but I suggest it is not comprehensive. It's not complete. We emphasize throughout the years, we have only like 4 or 5 characteristics of the remnant church. But if we study the Bible, we can find 10 of them. 10 of them. And one of them is like the doctrine of the sanctuary. The health message is part of the identity of the church, of the remnant church. A lot of things. The state of the dead. It is all written in the book of Revelation. 10 instead of 5 or 4. So it is incomplete. If you want the result, we have to look into that. It has to be more comprehensive in understanding and in application. And then I studied again the commission, the Great Commission. Our Great Commission, our understanding of the Great Commission is correct, but incomplete and not comprehensive enough. So I studied from the book Old Testament and the New Testament. And the New Testament, you have divide them into 2. the pre-resurrection and the post-resurrection. So it has to be comprehensive. And also in the gospel, in the Old Testament, what is the gospel in the Old Testament? That is the book of Isaiah. So we study all of that to know the Great Commission indeed. So with that, I come with, said as the Father commissioned his Son. He said in the book of John. But this is what I see. Instead of we believe that, okay, Jesus Christ was sent by his Father. That means the Great Commission, to understand the Great Commission, we need to understand the commission by the Father to his Son. Because Jesus came here to die, but he came also to live so that we can follow his example. So I studied the Great Commission by the Father to his Son. And I can see 5 elements in the Great Commission. And that is the communion with the Father and his Holy Spirit. And anointed to preach the gospel. You see all the references there. And the Spirit-filled discipling, teaching, divine healing, miracles in the power of the gospel, and doing good. So 5 elements. And he said, as my Father sent me, so I send you. So that Great Commission that I applied when I was on earth, that is exactly what I want you to do. So I studied again the Great Commission, the comprehensive Great Commission of Jesus Christ to the disciples. And then you can see that exactly what Jesus applied for the 3.5 years, this is what his disciples wanted to apply as well. We have also the 5 elements there. And what about the remnant church? It is said that it is the same now. The promise is just as strong and trustworthy now as in the days of the apostles. So there's no change. And it is said that we are Christ's representatives. So it is said that all that the apostles did, every church member today is to do. So you could see the thread from the Father to the Son, from the Son to the disciples, and from the Son also to the remnant church right now. So whatever applied by Jesus, applied by the disciples, should be applied as well now. But the problem is that we are not really applying it much. Not comprehensive enough. It is correct. So, for the communion with Jesus and the Spirit, in Mark chapter 3, verse 13 there, I did not read that, but I believe that this is key. You see, when Jesus Christ, he prayed all night and called the disciples, and it is said that he called them to be with him. To be with him. That is the paradigm shift right there. So, communion with Christ, prayer and fasting and all of this, it is not in preparation for the Great Commission. It is part of the Great Commission. That means when we pray, we are already fulfilling partly the Great Commission. Some people, real prayer is harder than work. That's why some people, they'd rather work than pray. So, communion, this is a key. I discussed this with my friend at the John conference, Pastor Jerry Page and his wife. He said, this is Paul, this is key. This is really key. And that is something that we need to emphasize. And also the manifestation of the power of God. They're doing good. And if we do all of that, the comprehensive, then we need also to have what I call the comprehensive revival and reformation. Exactly those 5 elements 6 elements needs to be revived. And one of them is health message. We talk a lot about revival and reformation, but we don't include enough the revival of the health message. And also the power of God. The power of God. Isaiah chapter 58, the fasting and the good work. So if we do all of that, we believe that what was promised, it will be, and that will remove the discrepancy between what was promised and what it is now. And the result is great revival, and Christ will come. And I have here the result of that, the outpouring of a latter rain, the loud cry, the persecution, the shaking, the sealing, the faithful to death, the finished work, and the second coming of Jesus. May the Lord be with us. We have 2 minutes for questions.
Are there any questions? Okay.
Are the presenter slides going to be available for students to look over?
Yes.
Could we turn on the AC in here, please?
Okay, any other housekeeping? Okay. All right, thank you, Dr. Ratsara.
Okay, all right.
Okay, our next up is Dr. almost Dr. Magda Rodriguez, and her talk title is Moral Identity and its Relationship to Higher Education Mentoring Experiences.
So it's going. Okay, good. Good afternoon. I just want to share with you that this is the requirement, one of the requirements for the completion of the PhD program in higher education administration. And one of the things that drew my attention to this topic was the fact that when we look at the news, and I also had experience of coworkers and colleagues that I admired them. They were extremely brilliant, extremely efficient. And all of a sudden, they have like what we in the church call a moral fall. But in the business, basically, they have an unethical behavior that brought disgrace not only to the organization, but also to their family and themselves. And I always question, they seem so bright, so brilliant, and so educated. What was the problem? And we know at the end, as Christians, we know there is a problem with sin. But there is also a way in your brain, how do you process when you focus or when you have unethical or an ethical issue in front of you? This issue is not only in the work environment. I want to share with you actually the results from the International Center of Academic Integrity 2020 survey. And they found that 32% of the students admitted cheating in any way on an exam. 2% getting someone else to do their academic work. 25.1% using unauthorized electronic resources for papers, project homework, or other assignments. 15% paraphrasing or copying a few sentences or more from any source without citing it in a paper or assignment you submitted. So we can see that the crisis is actually still coming from students as they come to the higher education institutions, and you will understand by the end of my presentation where that comes from. Now, this is not something new. This is something that has been going on for many years, and in 1998, the US Congress actually amended the Higher Education Acts from 1965 to make moral development as one of the priorities of higher education, one of the goals of higher education. When I went to college, I did not have an ethics class. Never took an ethics class. Right now, everywhere that you go in higher education, that is a basic requirement, because that's one of the goals. They see that as one of the goals of higher education, is to actually influence and help you to think through unethical situations. So higher education took this calling very quickly, and that's when they came up with the ethics curriculum. And they also started doing practices or activities like service learning. You take classes, you go to the community, and then you come and debrief in your classroom. It's just helping you to think through situations and ethical issues, and then it helps you to grow in the way that you process on ethical situations. However, again, I put again the International Center of Academic Integrity survey, they have been minimal change. They cannot prove that anything that they are doing and making a big difference. Now the question is, we should question why. How do we, process things? And we need to go to, I'm gonna discuss with you 3 basic models or principles. The first one is James Rest 4 components model, that it says that before you commit an unethical act, there are 4 psychological processes going in your brain. One is the moral awareness. Some people are not even aware that that is immoral, period, or unethical. Your moral reasoning, how do you reason through these difficult situations, sticky situation we call it sometimes. But there are other 2 components that we tend to forget, is the moral motivation. Do I really care to be a moral individual? Is it important to me as a person to do the right things? And the last one is having the endurance, because sometimes to stand up for what is right, it requires character and endurance to take or carry the consequences of your own decisions. So those are 4 components that go in your brain while you are facing an unethical decision. However, higher education, the reason why I highlighted the first 2, and I think that's where we are missing the mark here, is the fact that they are focusing mostly on moral awareness and moral reasoning. That's what the ethical class. But they are forgetting about the other components and what can higher education do about this. And that's the part that I want to share with you, and that's what my research is focusing on. According to Augusto Blasi, moral reasoning could be a good predictor of a moral action only if individuals are intrinsically motivated to do right. That means that that morality is part of your identity, it's part of who you are. You want to be a moral individual. And the other assumption is, and this is where it becomes kind of tricky, because the general assumption is that your moral identity is developing in your early age in life. That means that's why higher education doesn't see that as a priority for them, because you already come to the college with your moral identity developed. The question that we need to ask is, with the society changes in the family composition and practices, are young people really receiving that role model, that mentoring needed at the early stage to have a more solid moral identity defined by the time that they get to college? And that's where, you basically are teaching students to be moral individuals or to reason morally, but not having the power to actually act morally. So what did I do? In my study, what I did, I had 3 questions. Research question: to what extent do mentoring experiences in college correlate to the development of students' moral identity? So the reason why I chose mentoring is because when you do have a mentor, you develop a personal relationship with them. And it is expected that they should get to a personal level to help you, and you can model them. The second question that I have is, there is another variable that makes moral identity that is very strongly correlated to moral identity, and it is actually working. It's actually service, your engagement to community service, your engagement to the need of others. And the last thing, there are other moderators like family settings and things like that, and I would want to move quickly through the details, but I have one independent variable, and my independent variable, it was college. I used the tool called the College Students Mentoring Scale that many of you took that survey, and it was actually measuring what type of mentoring experience did you have while in college. And they are broke into 4 types of support. One is emotional support, degree and career support, academic knowledge support, and the existence of a role model. When we are saying existence of a role model, is that mentor that really took the time to develop a personal relationship with you. The dependent variable was the moral identity scales, and it's just based on specific moral traits like caring, compassionate, fair, friendly, generous, hardworking, helpful, honest, and kind. And those traits are actually manifested in 2 ways. There is internalization. That means, do I really believe that I have those? Do I really believe that I have those traits? And the other aspect is, does my actions reflect those traits? So it has 2 different aspects that this project looked at. What were the results? Let me jump to this, but this is more descriptive statistics, and I had students from freshmen through graduate school. And I had a lot of freshmen, but I actually helped trying to reduce and make it more even. But my professor disagreed, so I left everything in the way that I collected. One of the challenges that I had with my data was that I could only collect data from religious institutions. And that really, I think that it impacted my results in the family setting, because most of the family settings, I was raised with both parents, you know. So that part is something that is a good thing. But for my results, I could not see if there was any impact on the moral identity of the students. What I found fascinating, and not surprising, but is the fact that of the 4 types of mentoring experiences, it was actually only the role model, the existence of a role model as a mentor that had any statistical significance on the moral identity development of the students. Only that mentor that took the time to develop a relationship, what really made a difference on the moral identity development of the students. Now, what did I find in my multiple regression results? I found that basically the variation of the moral identity of the students, 11.6% could be explained by the existence of a role model. And the reason it's so low is just logical, the fact that there are many other factors, but it's still statistically significant. Now, I want you to look at that 11.6 and compare with almost a 20% when that existing role model is also engaged on community service with the students. It increased to 20% almost. Now, there are many things that we can learn from this. I had some findings. Finding number 1 was that only mentoring experience with role models while in college show a statistical significant correlation with the moral identity in internalization and symbolization development. The other thing is the results lead us to believe that moral identity is not necessarily something that is only developed as a childhood. We still have the opportunity at your age to also influence and impact the moral identity development of the students. The other thing that I learned is mother predictability increases when students' community service engagement covariate is added to the multiple regression analysis. So what does that mean? I'm gonna go, what does that mean for us? It means that as a higher education institution, we probably need to look at making sure that the faculty has time, or that they take the initiative to get closer to the student beyond a lecture. It is extremely important. And the other thing is to make sure that they work alongside the students serving others. Now, what does that mean for Weimar? I think that what is fascinating, when I started this, I was not at Weimar, I was not looking for those results, but I can see a good parallel of the framework that we have here. Because the TCI every Wednesday is a great opportunity for faculty to actually get closer to the student, and you don't realize the impact that you're having on the student. I'm speaking to the faculty, on the students when you go alongside, work with them, help others, look for the good in others. And you never know what is really the extent of your impact to the students, not only morally, but spiritually. I think that each teacher needs to realize the highest calling, because in the highest sense, the work of education and the work of redemption are one. I think that's it.
Thank you. All right, are there any questions? Any questions?
Up in the back.
Yes.
Maybe I just missed this, but there was a slide where you were comparing, I think it was the first finding, you were comparing two groups, and I didn't quite get what the second group was.
Oh, the groups are the same. I think it's more that they're modal internalization and modal symbolization. Is that?
No. It was like it only affected at the college level. The statement wasn't clear. It's like the third to
findings
last slide.
in the findings.
Yeah.
Number 1 or number 2?
It was number 1.
Only mentoring experiences. Okay, only mentoring experiences where the role model development, the role model relationship is developed, was the one that showed a drastically significant correlation with the moral identity development of the student.
So it was mentoring experiences versus what?
Versus being a role model. Well, the thing is, mentoring has 2 aspects. It's let's call it support. So you have a mentor that helps you through your schoolwork, mentor that helps you with your career planning. So that is more like a functional support. Versus more when you get into the affectional aspect of it. That means I built a relationship. I know who you are. I know what you're going through. We talk about personal things. So, it becomes like a friend. Oh. And that usually that's really the one that is able to get closer to the student and help with their moral identity development.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right.
Oh,
yeah.
There.
Okay.
I'm just curious, you said that you were only able to survey religious colleges. Were those Adventist colleges or were they other colleges?
No, I actually was able, one of the accrediting, ABSG, gave me access to other colleges, and that's a Christian organization. But the ideal, and that's what I was hoping, to get some public school, public university, where I can get a more balanced collection of data, but I wasn't able to do it, so.
Thank
John
you.
knows, yeah.
Okay, one more, and then Dr. Z, maybe you can go ahead and
You
start
can
setting up.
My question is, you started at the beginning talking about ethical falls, or at least in our context we can say moral falls, and I didn't quite understand the connection between your findings and that initial premise. What's the connection?
The connection was, remember when I said about the different models? The fact is, in order to have a moral fall, you basically engage 4 psychological processes. And one of them is moral awareness, moral reasoning, and then the moral motivation. I focus only on the moral motivation, that's what higher education is not really focusing on, because they believe that that's developed only during the early stages in life. And my proposition is that no, there is still development happening while you come to college.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there's other questions, you can catch Dr. Magda later.
Okay. Should I just go?
Yes.
We're
Oh,
on
no,
time
wait,
today. No?
Wait, our next speaker is Dr. Deutschen Zivadinovic, and his title is A Historical Biblical Reanalysis of the 10 Horns in Daniel 7. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know. I feel like having a word of prayer first before I approach this subject. Father, please help us. Thank you for all these wonderful projects, for the faculty and students. Please bless us in our presentations as we continue in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so this topic, so Magda, she is in education. She's obviously presenting some education. I'm a church historian, so this is kind of definitely a different field. This topic, I put it in 11 slides just to summarize it, but if you want to really have the full argument of what I'm arguing for, I made a paper, which is a 20-page paper that I can send you by email for free. Just don't publish it before I do. But even if you do that, it's okay, I guess. So I'm hoping to present this at the Adventist Theological Society this fall. By Dr. Yonker has mentioned that he will invite me for a presentation, so it's still pending. And so this is a paper I was working, and it talks about the 10 horns in Daniel chapter 7. And some of you might be familiar with some of these 10 different tribes, like Anglo-Saxons, Franks, Burgundians, Visigoths, Ostrogoths. And so we believe as Adventists in historicist interpretation. After the Rome collapsed, there's 10 toes, right? There's 10 horns. The 10 different kingdoms that emerged from the ashes of the Roman Empire. And so historically, we can definitely see that exactly what happened with the 10 tribes, the 10 kingdoms that emerged. And so our traditional Adventist interpretation has been, here's a quote from Uriah Smith. He lists those 10 horns as the Huns, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, the Franks, the Vandals, the Suevi, the Burgundians, the Heruli, the Anglo-Saxons, and the Lombards. And he's basically following Josiah Litch, who was the Millerite preacher. And Josiah Litch basically copies Thomas Newton, who was an Anglican scholar. And so Smith just follows in that line, and he includes the Huns. Now, Alonzo Jones, how many of you know Alonzo Jones? Minneapolis, 1888. He shows up at Minneapolis, and he challenges the Huns, you know. So he challenged only one tribe. I'm going to challenge 3 today. So anyways, and we know how controversial that was. So, okay. So the Huns are challenged, and we have accepted Alonzo Jones's reinterpretation. We adopted Alemanni instead of the Huns because, as you can see, the Huns, you see them here over here? That's not really Roman Empire, right? The Huns were like raiders. They invaded the Roman Empire, they pillaged, but then they were defeated, and they moved outside in this area, and they lived this area. So they have not established a kingdom on the former Roman Empire. So it's not 10 kingdoms emerged from this kingdom. The prophecy says 10 horns are the 10 kings that shall come out of this kingdom. So we're talking about on the territory of the former Rome. When the Rome falls apart, there needs to be 10 from that territory. So Alonzo Jones was correct. No, he did not. He included Alemanni. Now, Alemanni a little bit on the border, so it's a little disputable, but again, it's better than the Huns. So he included the Alemanni. So this is basically what we have, and this is what is accepted today in all majority of the Adventist interpreters. So Roy Anderson, Mervyn Maxwell, Jacques Ducan, Bill Shea. SDA Bible Commentary follows Alonzo Jones enlisting. Okay, good. All right, now, so this is basically these 10 tribes that we have: Anglo-Saxons, Alemanni, Ostrogoths, Visigoths, Vandals, Burgundians, Suevi, Franks, Lombards, Heruli. And the 3 horns that were uprooted by the little horn, traditionally we see them as Heruli, Vandals and Ostrogoths. Okay, now I have studied history and prophecy, and I have always been a little bit uncomfortable with the heruli. And then just recently, actually it was when we had this prophecy seminar by the little kids. Do you guys remember that, a year ago? And then she was like, heruli and vandals. I'm like, so cute, but wait a second, herulis. She's just repeating what we've been telling her. And so I looked at the heruli, and the heruli were actually, if you can see on the map, do you see it here? They're outside of the Roman Empire. And they actually helped the Huns. They were the mercenaries helping the Huns, raiding, and then they were defeated, and then they settled outside of the borders of the Roman Empire. So I'm like, where are we getting the heruli from? And by the way, the heruli have never been uprooted by the little horn. There was an Arian general by Odoacer who defeated the heruli one time, but it's not uprooted by the papacy. It's not part of the Roman kingdom. So I'm like, wait a second, we need to update this a little bit. And so problem number one, heruli were a Germanic tribe that joined the Huns in raiding the Roman Empire. They were used as mercenaries by different factions. The Huns, Odoacer, Byzantium, Ostrogoths. They were mostly used as mercenaries, but they never created their own kingdom, a horn, inside the borders of the former Roman Empire. And therefore, what do we have to do? Just keep the status quo, or should we rewrite it? We have to rewrite it. Okay. So problem number one, we have one horn that is kind of like a flimsy horn, okay? We have to uproot it, okay, in a different way, and put the good horn. All right, that's not just problem number one. Problem number two, when Uriah Smith said heruli, this is really what he meant. He didn't mean that tribe that was outside. He meant the kingdom of Odoacer. Okay, what is the kingdom of Odoacer? Let me show you on the map. Where's the map? Here. So do you see this green area? So there was this general by the name of Odoacer, and he worked for the Roman Empire. And he was a half Hun, half Syri, another German tribe, but he had different Germanic mercenaries working for him. Syri, Thuringi, and the Heruli. So he had several different mercenaries working for him. And so Thomas Newton, Anglican scholar, he mentions Odoacer as one of the 10 horns, his kingdom. And he says Odoacer with Heruli, Thuringi, and Syri. And then Josiah Litch, he says Odoacer with Heruli and Thuringi. And then Smith says Odoacer with heruli. Actually, he just erased Odoacer, just put heruli. So it's confusing because it was not a kingdom of the heruli, right? He was just using some herulis as his mercenaries. But in the process of copying, 2 minutes? No, wait. Okay, but not even the kingdom of Odoacer can be one of the 10 horns. Why not? The kingdom of Odoacer was not a heruli kingdom. We already established that, even though we call it heruli. Odoacer shortly ruled over 2 Western Roman provinces, Italy and Illyricum. And he was actually a vassal of the Eastern Roman Emperor Zeno. Odoacer was called the Duke of Italy. He was not an independent kingdom that replaced Rome, but an extension of the Eastern Roman Empire. And so the professor of antiquity from University of Chicago, Dr. Caldelis, calls the Odoacer state a protectorate of Zeno. Odoacer, he built coins with the face of Roman emperor in Constantinople. The laws that he had was Roman laws, not like Ostrogoths. When they came, they had Germanic laws. It was independent kingdom, Odoacer was ruling. He built coins with the, I always said about coins. He called himself, and he was called the Duke of Italy. He's not a king. He's just a duke of the larger. So this is not an independent kingdom, independent from Rome. This is low energy. So this is just extension of the eastern, or a remnant of Rome, you can say. I need a cable. Okay. Wonderful. So, anyways, for a whole argument, please consult my paper to see this different description of Odoacer's realm. Okay, so we give extra time for this. Okay. Come on, Mac. Oh, no, it's coming. Password, Jesus. Okay, now I know my password. Okay, so we have a problem with, first, it's not Kingdom of Odoacer does not fit as one of the independent kingdoms. We have another problem. Another problem is that we usually say 3 uprooted kingdoms were Vandals, the Heruli, which were not, and then the Ostrogoths. But Ostrogoths were not uprooted before 538 AD. They reconquered Rome in 542, and they were ruling the whole Italy until finally, again, in 553 AD, they were finally uprooted by the Byzantines. So the question is, wait a second, does Bible prophecy insist that the 3 horns must be uprooted before the papacy received secular power in 538 AD? What does the text actually say? No, actually. Daniel 7:24 states, he, little horn, shall subdue 3 horns. See, little horn does not exist before 538. You see what you follow what I'm saying? Little horn is a political power. It's little horn is when papacy receives political power. Papacy for the first time received political power in 538 and became a horn. And so he says, he, the horn, shall subdue 3 horns. So 3 horns have to be subdued after 538, not before. So this fits, because Ostrogoths were actually subdued in 553. So that actually fits. Well, solution number 1, replace Heruli or Odoacer realm with the Britons. The Britons, you see in England, the Anglo-Saxons, they came and they conquered one area, but there was a Sabbath-keeping kingdom of the Britons who was holding the Anglo-Saxons, and this used to be Roman territory all the way till Hadrian's Wall. You see, here's Hadrian's Wall, which we're going to visit this summer. This used to be a Roman Empire before, yes or no? And so now, when the Anglo-Saxon established a kingdom, you have 2 kingdoms in the British on the British island. You have the Britons. Why are we not counting them as one of the 10? Huh? Okay, so just replace Heruli with the Britons. And Britons were actually uprooted by the Roman Catholic Anglo-Saxons. It was a slow process, but by the 900 AD, they were completely pushed away into Iona Island. They were pushed into Ireland, and they were pushed away and uprooted. So that's solution number 1. Solution number 2, I have 2 solutions, okay? Solution number 2, so instead of the Heruli, just put Britons, who are actually uprooted after 538, and the Ostrogoths, you put 553, and then, well, Vandals cannot be. Vandals cannot be. Why? Excluded because Vandals and Burgundians, they were destroyed by the Byzantines, yes, and by the Franks, Burgundians, but before 538. So they don't fit he shall subdue. So that's why we have Lombards who were actually destroyed by the Franks, big Franks, Catholic Charlemagne, the big Frank. Okay, so Ostrogoths, Lombards, and Britons, they fit. Now, some people say, oh, Visigoths, how about the Visigoths? They were conquered after 538, yes, but by the Arab Islam, not by the little horn. He shall subdue 3 horns. So Visigoths don't fit. You see, there's criteria in the text. If you follow the criteria in the text, it clearly just uproots or eradicates the horns that shouldn't be there. And we have so we have these 3. These 3 fit the criteria after 538, and they were actually uprooted by the Roman Catholic forces. Okay, here, stone me. Bye. Questions?
Pastor Don, if you can go ahead and get ready. And then, is there one question? That was interesting.
Nobody challenges this.
No challenges. Okay, here's one.
How do we get a copy of your paper?
Email me. You have my email? Yes.
Okay, the title of our next talk is by Pastor Don McIntosh. The title is The Law and Its Logic, Where Atheists and Christians Agree.
I was sitting in the back section, and there was a mass exodus. I think there was a plague in the back. What happened? Anyway, I don't want to point that out too much. So, our motto here, thank you, by the way, for allowing me to be a part of this august body. I feel honored beyond reasonable latitudes. So, our motto, our seal here is to heal a hurting world. And our institutional student learning objectives are probably things that you think about every day. How many of you have memorized these institutional student learning outcomes? Okay, Dr. Harris has. And that's why and so has Dr. Follett. So look, these are the only reasons we're here. These 2 people are keeping us afloat. It is our purpose not to only offer degree programs, but more so to prepare them, that would be you, students, for comprehensive health evangelism first and foremost. And the first student learning objective is spiritual leaders. Students follow Jesus Christ, example of faith-filled leadership by rendering love-motivated church ministry that magnifies the universal principles of the biblical 10 Commandments in speech and action. If that doesn't roll off your tongue, nothing will. So the first objective is spiritual leadership that's focused on using the what? 10 Commandments. And that's because the law of the Lord is perfect, converting or restoring the soul, and the testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. So how would a staff member or a student magnify the universal principles of the 10 Commandments in speech and action? By reordering the horns of Daniel 7. Right? Close. It is in there, you know. Thinking to change times and laws, maybe also important. So, how did this happen in church history? First of all, we're going to be going on a tour. There actually is some room left to go with Deutsch and myself. How many would like to hear more of Dr. Z and me? No? Okay, so you go on this tour, you might hear more of that. But when I was studying this subject, I found out that these reformers, they would leave copies of the 10 Commandments in the places they went. Like John Huss, he left a copy of the 10 Commandments in every tavern or every place that he went. He left a copy of the 10 Commandments. And he got that idea from Wycliffe. Wycliffe, we're going to go see his house and hang out with him. And then Luther. Luther said, how do I magnify the 10 Commandments? I pray the commandments. and I even write a song about the 10 Commandments. And this is what he did. I read and recite the word of the Lord's Prayer and the 10 Commandments. You will never offer up incense or another savor more potent against the devil than to occupy yourself with God's commandments and words and speak, sing, and meditate on them. So how did he magnify it? He sang about it. He put it in his life. And that's how Huss did it. He handed out copies of the 10 Commandments. And this brings transformation in people's lives. There was a lady that came to our church in Wichita. She came, and I go, why, how did you hear about us? And she said, well, my dog kept getting lost, or the Mills dogs kept getting lost. Dr. Mills kept getting lost. And then one day I was talking about their dog that was always lost. And we've been talking, and they said they go to church on Saturday. And then I remembered a bracelet someone had given me with the 10 Commandments on it. And I always wondered, why is it that we don't go to church on Saturday instead of Sunday? So what had evangelized her? The 10 Commandments. So anyone who knows the 10 Commandments perfectly knows the entire Scriptures, Luther said, and is qualified, last sentence because I'm out of time almost, to sit in judgment on all doctrines, estates, persons, laws, and everything else in the world. So this would be everything. You want to judge your chemistry class? 10 Commandments. You want to judge in counseling? 10 Commandments. You want to be a good 10 Commandments. That's what Luther said. Now, there was someone who really was into Luther. And this lady, her name was Anne Boleyn. How many of you have ever heard of Anne Boleyn? My daughter's not even raising her hand when I've talked about Anne Boleyn for like 3 years and packed it all into about 3 months. 3 years worth of Anne Boleyn in 3 months. And she got married to Henry VIII. Henry VIII really liked Anne Boleyn, and Anne Boleyn didn't really like Henry VIII. Henry VIII actually was trying to get out of his marriage based on the law of God. He said the law of God says you can't have your brother's wife and uncover his nakedness. And he says that's a commandment. They had a Bible study that went through all the universities of Europe studying that. It was written by a guy named Cranmer. And this was all talking about the law of God and about the 10 Commandments. And Anne was totally into the 10 Commandments. Now, people have given Anne a bad name. They say she was just trying to cozy up to King Edward to get married. But you know that Anne told Ed, dude, lay your hands off me. I'm not going to have sex until I get married. Can you say amen? Hello, there should be a robust amen to that here at this college. So she said, I'm not doing that. And she, in fact, did not do that. She would not get married because she says, I'm not going to be a mistress. I'm not going to do that. And Anne Boleyn says this, I said my prayers like every good Christian woman should and endeavored to obey the 10 Commandments to live by God's teaching wherever it was convenient. Now, they begin to point out, they said the reformers, now Dr. Rotsara thinks prayer is a big thing. I think that's good. But I think the commandments are even better. So pray the 10 Commandments, then we'll be together, just like Luther did. And as a matter of fact, they would spot those who were involved in revival and reformation by whether or not they carried the 10 Commandments with them. And if you carried the 10 Commandments, you were seen as a reformer. By the end of the reign, the Creed, the Lord's Prayer, the 10 Commandments were all spoken in English. That's by the end of Henry VIII's reign. But the reason for that was because of Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn introduced him to William Tyndale. Anne Boleyn introduced him to these things. He was basically a Catholic. Now, in making Anne his wife, Henry was taking a stand against the Pope. He was making a religious statement against the Catholic dominance. And he was actually marrying someone who stood for the 10 what? 10 Commandments. And this sent a message. So this is a fascinating book called The Reformation of the Decalogue. In other words, the Decalogue needed to be reformed. What does that mean? Well, Anne Boleyn's daughter actually ends up becoming Queen of England after all the others were knocked out. And she, this is Elizabeth, not my Elizabeth, but the Elizabeth. Not, well, I mean, they're both Elizabeths. But every church, by that time, Anne Boleyn's daughter, she was close to her mother. She knew she stood for the 10 Commandments. She knew what that meant. And she said, every single church in this realm must have the 10 Commandments in it. All 9,000 churches. Now, I want to take our bus to see some of those churches. I don't know if I'm going to present or convince Dr. Z. We're probably going to be rooting up horns somewhere else. But I'm hoping we can go to one of these churches. How many would like to go see one of those? Wait, you should have raised your hand. You're the only person I'm trying to convince. So look at this. These are some of the boards. See, there's some of the boards in the churches. There's only 30 churches out of 9,000 that still have the boards. And these are pictures of the Ten Commandments that were put up in these churches to teach the Ten Commandments. And I loved Magda's presentation to teach moral identity. Where did she go? Where's Magda? There she is. And the big mentor here was Anne Boleyn, mentoring Henry VIII. And then Elizabeth mentored the entire nation. Now, here's this is kind of interesting. They liked the sevens back then. 7 sins, 7 sacraments, 7 mercies. And for most of the Middle Ages, the moral system was the 7 deadly sins. But the list was not Christian, but Greek and astrological in origin. But what happened then during the Reformation was that Anne Boleyn and the other reformers said, let's do the math. It ain't 7, it's 10. And that then changed the moral fabric. As they begin looking at the Ten Commandments, it actually changed the morality of an entire nation. It was like counseling the entire nation. 10 Commandments, Lord's Prayer, and Fox's Book of Martyrs. It's worth dying for, and God's going to change your life. Because look what he did with my wife, says Henry VIII. And that's the foundation of this book that I wrote, which I didn't want to give you the same information, but what I've seen is the transformative power of the Ten Commandments in counseling sessions, even this week. And I see not only people's lives changing when I've turned this list of 10 Commandments into questions, they don't even know it, but actually I've seen their biochemistry changing. Now, I have not yet proved that, but I know it's true. And that's what the research needs to do. The 10 Commandments needs to lead the research. Can you say amen? Because the 10 Commandments are the foundation of everything true. And that is my presentation. And I know that was highly academic there at the end especially. So, any questions? Oh, wait, I'm not supposed to ask that.
Yeah. Are there any questions?
Please ask me some questions.
It's The Law and Its Logic.
The Law and Its Logic, where 10 Commandments and atheists agree. Why is that such a good title?
Christians and atheists agree.
Yeah. Why is that such a good title? Why is that such a good title? The reason it's a good title is because actually studies in all Western nations show that atheists and Christians agree above the 90th% level on all the last 5 commandments, and the lowest level of agreement is 47% with the Sabbath, which means anybody you talk to, 5 out of 10 people agree with the 10 Commandments. How many think this is a great thing to be talking about?
Can you tell us an example of therapy through 10 Commandments that, like, just recently?
Yeah. Okay, so how many minutes? I can't do it in 10 seconds. But people usually are dissatisfied because they have listened to lies, messed up their intimacy, felt stolen from, and feel like killing themselves. That's everybody over there right now, depression recovery. When they come, I document what's happening with them, and also an authority figure has messed up. They don't have a mentor like Magda says. They don't have someone to look up to, or someone that they looked up to let them down. So that's the reason they're depressed. So then the treatment comes from the first 4 commandments, helping them remember where it is that they've been delivered, where they've been shown mercy, and when they see that, then out of gratitude, they want to walk in the law of liberty and express gratitude daily and weekly. And those first 4 things are the treatment for the depression. And I'm telling you, it happens all the time. In fact, even today, right now, today, 2 people came in and said, I never really understood what was wrong with me, but now I do. I want to recommit my life to God in baptism. They're going to be baptized this weekend. They don't even know yet that I used the 10 Commandments in their treatment. They don't know that. But I know it. And God knows it, and now you know it too.
Thank you, Pastor Don.
Thank you so much. we will move into the students' presentations, and I want to invite the first speaker today, Alec Crum. His topic is the positive effects of classical music and the negative effects of notification sounds on the memory of college students.
Thank you very much. Let's get set up here. All right. Thank you very much for coming, everybody, and I want to welcome you to the Weimar Symposium and the student portion of the Weimar Symposium. So, as he said, my name is Alec Crum, for those of you who don't know me, and I will be presenting my research on effects of classical music and notification sounds on the memory of college students. So, in this modern world, we have many distractions. We are plagued with many distractions. And as students, it can be very difficult for us to really focus on our studies at times. We have our phones that are very distracting. We have our computers that can be very distracting. And unfortunately, some of the things that are distracting us are also actually decreasing our ability to remember what we have studied. So in our study time, it's really decreasing the effectiveness of that study time. And with phones, not only, researchers found not only can the audible notification sounds of our phones distract us from the work that we're doing, or from the studying that we're doing, but some studies have even found that just having our phones near us can actually decrease our ability to focus and that sort of thing. And researchers also found that classical music can actually do the opposite, can counteract that. Classical music can help to boost our memory and attention. So this study was designed to look at these two opposite effects. Now, a total of 29 students from Weimar University participated in the study. And as you can see, there's pretty equal representation from the guys and the girls, as well as fairly equal representation from each of the four grade groups there. Now what we did was we brought the students into the old chapel and we put them through a series of memory tests. And I will show you some of those examples of the memory tests in just a moment. But they were put into 3 different groups. Group 1 was a control group where we used silence. Group 2 was a positive group using classical music. And group 3 was a negative group using notification sounds. And I'll go into more depth about what each of those groups are in just a moment. Now here's an example of some of the memory tests that we did. You can see on the top left there, the first example. This example utilizes working memory and spatial reasoning, where the students would keep that object in mind and then have to mentally rotate it in order to get the correct answer. You can see in the middle there all those objects. That's an example of, we put that up for the students to look at for 30 seconds. This is utilizing short-term memory. And then after 30 seconds, they had to write down as many of those objects that they could remember. And then you can see on the top right there, that's an example of something else also using short-term memory, where the students were given 15 seconds to memorize a string of numbers and then asked to write down as many as they could remember. Now, while they were taking these tests, there are 3 different groups, as I mentioned earlier. So the control group was working in silence as they took these memory tests. The positive group was listening to some classical music, and specifically Vivaldi's Spring from the Four Seasons. The negative group, however, was listening to some randomly spaced notification sounds. So there was different notification sounds, and they were randomly spaced, so the students weren't just getting used to hearing the same notification over and over again. We used SPSS 29.0 to analyze do the statistical analysis of the results that we found. And we ran univariate ANOVA, looking at the differences between the different groups in short-term memory, working memory, total memory overall, as well as the perceived focus of the individuals. And we also looked at some differences between genders, but we weren't able to look at differences between grade groups because they weren't equal, unfortunately. And then now we'll go over our results. So the first thing that we found was that classical music may improve working memory. While we didn't actually see a decline in memory ability in the group listening, working with the notification sounds, we did see a positive trend towards increased working memory capability of the students who were working while listening to the classical music. It was greater than compared to the control group working in silence. We also saw a positive relationship for females and memory scores, as you can see there. There was a positive relationship with working memory, as well as a positive relationship with total memory overall. These results were not statistically significant, but they were, there was an observable trend that was interesting to note. And interestingly, females also reported greater focus during the tests. So they perceived, they did a self-assessed perceived focus at the end of the test, and females actually reported having greater focus. Not really sure why. Maybe the guys just had something bad to eat that day, or maybe the girls just really, had their A game on that day. Not really sure exactly what was going on, but that's what we found. And in conclusion, while this study did support the literature findings in the benefits of classical music on memory, it did not support the literature in finding the difference in the negative group, the group listening to notifications while they're doing the test. But this could be a result of some various limitations of this study, such as a small sample size, or it could be a result of students, they were just listening to the music in the room instead of listening to personalized music with headphones. Or it could be partially because the memory test maybe wasn't quite hard enough. And if it was harder, then it may have created some more drastic results. However, through this study, we can see that in this world with so many distractions, it is more important than ever that we learn strategies on how to improve our attention and focus and memory, especially as college students. And I believe that this study just began to scratch the surface on the benefits of classical music in this technological age. And I think that with more time and greater resources, we could really find greater ways for college students to be able to stay focused and stay sharp for their studying. And in closing, I just wanted to say a special thank you to Dr. Garcia for helping with this study, as well as all of you students who participated in my study. And I'll be accepting questions now.
Wonderful. Any question?
Only 2 minutes.
You mentioned that you were looking at male and female, and it was a self-reported. What was the difference again?
Yeah, so at the end of the test, do you want to look at the result? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, there was the big, you said it's not statistically different, but it looks like a 30-point difference on the graph, it looks
Oh,
like the
I'm
biggest.
sorry. I may have misspoken. So the
Yeah.
perceived focus, this was significantly
No,
different.
that's perceived focus.
Mhm.
So you're asking girls, were you more focused? And they said yes. And then you ask guys, and then they say no or yes. But that's maybe because women are more agreeable.
So actually what this was at the end of the test, I said rate your focus on a scale of 1 to 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe guys are harder on themselves.
I suppose that's a possibility.
Yeah. So it's a self-perceived.
Right, that's correct. Self-perceived focus.
I was just wondering if in the study with the notification sounds, if they were the students' own or people's own notification sounds, and if that would make a difference. If you know it's not yours and you don't have to worry about it versus your own and what you might be already primed to have to pay attention to. Did the
Yeah.
study say, the one that you...
So that's a really good question. So no, it wasn't the students' own phones. And I wondered about that, and some students even mentioned like, oh, I think it would have been more distracting if it was my phone. What I found in the literature was that there was one study that showed that it actually didn't matter if it was the student's phone or another phone that was ringing. It was still distracting them. So that could have made a difference because it wasn't actually a phone, it was just a speaker playing these sounds. But it seemed like from the research that there wasn't a difference whether it was their personal phone or somebody else's phone. Yes, that's correct.
So it wasn't real phone.
That's correct.
So they knew it wasn't a real phone.
I didn't tell them ahead of time that they were going to be listening to that.
Alec, you mentioned the gender aspect of females performing better. What does the literature actually say with some of the working memory tasks that you utilized? And
Yeah.
also, why do you think Vivaldi's Spring had such a great effect in such a small amount of time?
Sorry, can you repeat that last part?
Why do you think Vivaldi's Spring had such a great effect in such a small amount of time?
Okay, so first of all, yeah, that was something interesting that we found where some of the working memory tests were like the spatial one where I told you about. You have this image and then you're supposed to kind of rotate it in your mind to find the right answer. In the research, we actually see that men perform better on those kinds of things, or those spatial tasks than women do. So this actually is kind of opposite to what we see in the literature. We don't really know exactly why that is. It could just be, again, a result of like a smaller sample size. And then as far as Vivaldi's Spring, that specifically the first movement, I mean, the one we heard, it's very lively, very upbeat. There's research that talks about the higher frequencies, and there's lots of those higher frequencies in that first movement specifically, and those are very good for your brain. So I would think that's why it could have a positive benefit.
Thank you so much. Is there one burning one as the next students prepares, please?
Yes.
Okay. I'll
Joaquin.
introduce the next students in 1 minute. Just set up.
Yeah, I was just wondering what statistical test do you use for your data?
Yeah, so we used univariate ANOVA. Univariate ANOVA, and then we're using Tukey post hoc test to look at the results for that. And Cohen's effect size.
Thank you so much. That was an interesting presentation. It involves male and female. We're always interested to know who is winning. Our next speaker, Ellen Hartman, BSc student, and her title is An 18-Day Lifestyle Program's Effect on Chronic Kidney Disease Patients.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have the privilege of talking about a project that I've been doing this past year on the impact of the New Start program on chronic kidney disease patients. So first of all, what is chronic kidney disease? One of the big diagnostic tests that is done for chronic kidney disease is eGFR, estimated glomerular filtration rate. And so typically if someone has less than 90 milliliters per minute per 1.72 meters squared, then they are considered in stage 2 of chronic kidney disease, and they could be diagnosed with that condition. There's also problems when you have too much filtration. In fact, that's actually what first happens when someone goes down that pathway. First, the kidneys will overcompensate, and then they will be damaged. So what is a glomerulus? You have a kidney over there on the screen, and in the nephrons, there's a part of the nephron where there's a glomerulus, and the glomerulus is basically a network of blood vessels inside of the Bowman's capsule, that structure surrounding that right there, that enables the blood to be filtered into the urine. And so, into the filtrate and then into the urine, of course. So basically, if you have certain conditions that are detrimental to the kidneys, this filtration barrier will be affected, it'll be damaged, there'll be some scarring that develops, and then you'll have decreased filtration. So you'll have toxins that build up in the blood. And two of the most common pathologies that affect chronic kidney disease are diabetes and hypertension. And they both follow a similar path. First, you have more filtration, for example, in diabetes. The body tries to compensate by filtering more of the blood sugar into the urine, and in that process it causes the glomerulus to be damaged. And then with high blood pressure, of course, you have that natural pressure that's feeding that filtration increase, and then you'll have damage there as well. So treatment, common treatment for chronic kidney disease, really just involves treating the underlying factors that caused kidney disease in the first place. So things like medications to reduce blood sugar, blood pressure, and also diet and exercise. Oftentimes a lower sodium diet, lower protein diets are recommended, and exercise as well. So previous research has demonstrated some benefits of lifestyle interventions improving health outcomes for these patients, but oftentimes they would focus on diet or nutrition, or they'd focus on exercise, but they don't really have many studies focusing on a comprehensive program like New Start has, where you have diet, you have exercise, and you have so many other factors as well. And so as I was figuring out what to do for my capstone project, I had heard of patients that had gone through the New Start program and had really experienced a dramatic change in their ability to filter their blood through their kidneys in chronic kidney disease. And I was thinking that it would be really good to study this as well. So I was trying to determine the New Start effect on chronic kidney disease patients' lab values, and also some correlations with those lab values and estimated glomerular filtration rate. And you guys are at Weimar, so you know all about New Start and what it entails. There's also spiritual counseling that's involved in New Start, and there is a dietitian that works with the patients. There's hydrotherapy as well, so a lot of different components are included. I included patients 70 or younger simply because the eGFR value that I was using is not accurate above 70. So these are the results for my study. with the different factors here, there was a significant change in EGFR after the 18 days for all the participants. And as you can see, a lot of the other lab values significantly decreased. Creatinine did not increase. Actually, it didn't decrease, that's what we're looking for, but it also didn't increase. There's really no change in there. So then I also looked at different groups of patients to see if there was a difference in how their EGFR was affected throughout the program. And overall, there wasn't really a significant change between the groups except for males and females. But if you did have a condition like diabetes or hypertension, there is a less likelihood that you would have increased EGFR, at least significantly. So what I found interesting was the fact that there was a difference between males and females. And after researching that more closely, I found that estrogen has an impact on the kidneys to protect them. So that is one factor. But over time, maybe if the patients were to continue the New Start program, they would receive benefit even if they were males. So I also looked at correlations with EGFR, and as you can see, the change in creatinine and change in blood urea nitrogen and change in glucose were all negatively correlated with EGFR. You want a higher EGFR value, so if those lab values decrease, then you would have an increase in EGFR. But it was interesting to look at the other variables like blood pressure and weight that do have a positive correlation. And if you think about it, with lower blood pressure, you will also, at least initially, have a decrease in EGFR because you'll have decreased pressure. But overall, you're saving your kidneys from becoming more damaged, and you could potentially have a more likelihood of improving that EGFR. Also with weight, change in weight, with that change in weight, you might be excreting a lot of toxins into your urine as well. So, and then with males, you can see that they did improve in a lot of these factors as well. And comparing that with females, we can see that the females had a markedly decreased blood urea nitrogen compared to males, and that may be a factor that helped them to have increased EGFR. So with blood urea nitrogen, you want a diet that is plant-based with not as much animal protein, because that can really help with blood urea nitrogen. And for the future, it would be good to have a long-term study of this so that you could see a change in EGFR, because this is a chronic condition. And I'm thinking that with the longer study time, you may be able to see that males would also improve significantly. So the New Start program has demonstrated significant potential in improving chronic kidney disease patients. And if you can improve your blood urea nitrogen levels in the short term, you can also improve that EGFR.
Thank you. 2 questions, if any. Okay.
Were there any, or did you study any differences between particular stages of the kidney disease, or any differences between the GFR values? Because different stages of kidney disease can have effects on the GFR, or was it purely male and female? And if you did study them, were there any significant differences between the stage of kidney disease and the effect of the 18-day?
I didn't look at that in depth, but in my cursory review of that, I found that at least for patients who completely resolved their chronic kidney disease during the 18 days, they were either in stage 2, stage 1, or stage 3 was the lowest. So, that can indicate that the further down you go in the chronic kidney disease stages, the less likely it is to have, a complete recovery within a short amount of time.
Final question? I don't see any.
Dr. Follett is over.
Oh.
I'm just going to give you a personal testimony because when I came to Weimar, I had a stage 3 chronic kidney disease, and my GFR was in the 40s, and it's now in the 70s.
Praise God.
So this lifestyle is very helpful, and I'm a living testimony of it, and I couldn't believe it when my GFR was 70-something. And I'm telling you that because I want you to have an example you can say, and I know this is true because it happened to me.
That's wonderful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Helen. Our next presenter, Emily, and her topic is the false consensus effect and the impact of morality on social perception at Weimar University.
All right, hello everyone. I'm excited to talk to you about some social psychology today. We're going to look at the false consensus effect and the impact of morality on social perception of college students. So, what is the false consensus effect, you might be wondering? Well, it is the cognitive bias to think that other people will think the same way that you do. And so why does this occur? Well, there are some reasons: selective exposure and cognitive availability. That means, things that you're exposed to, you are more likely to think of things that are similar than things that are dissimilar. It's more available to you, and you'll think other people will do the same thing. Salience and focus of attention. If something is eye-catching, if someone has said it in a conversation many times, things like that, that's going to bring your attention to it. And as a rational human being, you think in a logical way, and so you assume other people will do the same thing. And then humans love to be validated. I'm guilty of this for sure, but we have a motivation to be included in groups or to think the same way, and so that's part of motivational processes. And so, why study morality though? At least this is something that's new with my study. The literature doesn't really look at the false consensus effect with morality, but morality is important, as we learned from Mrs. Rodriguez. But moral acts are associated with greater happiness, especially if you are the recipient of it, and greater sense of purpose if you are the initiator of it. You may have heard of something called moral contagion, where if some moral act is done to you, you are more likely to do something moral in the future. And the same goes for immorality. If you've ever heard of those pay it forward, where you pay for everyone behind you in the drive-thru, that's kind of like an example of what a moral contagion would be. And so how do you study morality? It's kind of an abstract thing, but you can use tests and questionnaires and scenario-based stories, as well as Kohlberg's stages. He had 6 stages, and the higher you go, the more moral judgment or moral maturity you have, is what he was saying. So my hypotheses were that Weimar students would demonstrate the false consensus effect, as is seen in the literature, but I also transferred that to Weimar students would do that when making moral judgments. So how did I do this? Well, I used a questionnaire to 49 Weimar University students and presented 3 different topics to them, or 3 different stories. The first one was a supermarket story where a reporter would come up to you and say, what do you think of this supermarket? And then you would say, oh, it's great, love the prices. And they were like, okay, do you want to sign or not sign a release in order to have you advertise for the supermarket? And so that's a choice that the questionnaire had them making. And then a traffic ticket story where you're going way too fast on the highway, a cop pulls you over, and he's just putting a bunch of egregious, misinformation on the ticket, but you were going fast. In any case, the decision there is, would you pay the $20 fine, or would you contest the charge? And then a third story, which is the moral story. It has an escaped prisoner, where there's this guy, let's call him Mr. Thompson. He is convicted and is sent to jail for 10 years, but he's escaped, and you see him, and he's now an upstanding citizen. He's donating to charity, he has a job, but he's still a convicted convict. So you'd have to decide whether to report him or not report him. And so the participants estimated the percentage of people they think would choose the same as them and opposite of them, and also their different personality traits. And so the data was analyzed using frequencies and t-tests in SPSS 29.0, and qualitative measures and coding was used for the subjective data, which was the moral stuff. So let's look at the demographics here. Even though females were more responding, the males actually had pretty good representation. It's about almost 50-50. Whites were the most that responded, followed by 2 or more races, and then Asians. And then in terms of school year and major, the freshmen were the most represented, followed by juniors and seniors. And then for the major, definitely natural science, followed by pre-nursing, education, and religion. So that's about the demographics we have here, but let's get into some results. Here are some just basic frequencies. Students were more likely not to sign the release, 59.2% to 40.8%. Those that took the test, be thinking about what you put. Anyway, the students were more likely not to sign the release. For the second story, the students were more likely to pay the speeding fine by far, 73.5% to 26.5%. And then, for the last one, students were more likely not to report Mr. Thompson to the police, 65.3% to 34.7%. Kind of interesting, right? And so let's get into the actual, the data here. We did some tests on them. And for this one, there is a trend towards people thinking that others would choose the same option as them if they signed the release. So you can see there, 75% had consensus if they signed the release, which is interesting because we just saw that most students thought, or at least said that they would not sign the release. But those that said they would sign the release thought other people would do that as well, by far. So on the next one, paying the fine was significantly more likely to demonstrate false consensus. So you can see 86.1%. And I think further research on this would be pretty interesting because this study was based on one that was done in the 70s, the original false consensus research study. And $20 in the 70s, I think, goes a little bit farther than it does now. And so if it was $400 or something like that, I wonder if there would be more false consensus for the other option. There is in social psychology the idea that in decision making, we tend to choose the option that will take the least amount of effort. And so $20, all that effort to contest the charge. And so I think that there's actually a study with Samuelson and Zeckhauser that looked at, if you have a default retirement plan, they presented this to people, a default retirement plan and a retirement plan where you had to make a lot of active or proactive decisions, but you could get better benefits and returns later, most people tended to choose the default, even knowing that in the first place. So I see a little bit of this happening here, perhaps. And then the other one here is not reporting Mr. Thompson significantly more likely to demonstrate false consensus. I found the morality one really interesting because what I had people do is give qualitative reasons, give reasons why they would choose that option and why the others would choose the other option. And then I coded the different Kohlberg stages to their answers, so 1 to 6. And so, very interestingly, is that students believed they had higher morality than others. Basically, they said that they would make more moral decisions than other people would. And so this is pretty interesting. At least the most common qualitative answer people gave is that Mr. Thompson has, he's become an upstanding citizen, he's contributing to society, and so there's no reason to punish him more. That is the most common answer that was given. And so, in conclusions, I think it would be really, really neat for further research to look into the extremity of personality traits. I did include personality traits on my questionnaire, but there was so much data, so much to do, that I just condensed it into what this was. I think this was pretty interesting, but I'd love to look at the personality traits. And then comparing the data between Weimar students and secular university students, and the prevalence of false consensus there. And then I just think that the most important thing, or at least something that really stands out, is our natural inclination to be focused on self. This impacts our ability to relate and witness with others, but really the Bible is correct in that it's so easy and so natural to be self-focused. And so, yeah, I want to acknowledge the 49 participants who volunteered their time, Dr. Garcia for her continual encouragement, and so much time lent to me in order to help me with my statistics. And Jonathan helps me in more ways than one, so I want to acknowledge that too. Here are the references. And then also, thank you. Do you have any questions for me, if there's time?
1.5 questions? You just, oh.
What was the right answer?
The right answer? For which one? For the last one? Well, I wouldn't say there's a right answer, but have you ever heard of the Heinz dilemma? That is one where basically it's if you're in G-Psych, you'd know about where a guy has a choice between stealing a drug or not in order to save his dying wife from this evil druggist. Basically, you can have right or wrong, or I should say right answers for each stage. So you could say, Heinz should have stolen the drug for this reason, and that would be a level 6 answer. And you could say Heinz should not have stolen the drug, and that would also be a level 6 answer. So you really, as with most moral questions, it's hard to say there's a right answer. That was my favorite part to look at, though, in the questionnaire.
Thank you so much, Emily. Our next presenter is Isabella Choi. Topic: community food education with local food banks.
All right, good morning. Oh no, good afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone. First of all, my name is Isabella, those who doesn't know me. And before I start with my presentation, I would like to share with you a quote. There's this famous chef and writer called Julia Child. And she said these words: people who love to eat are always the best people. Do you all agree with that? I do, because I am one of them. So, I love eating, and eating for me is an important and one of the biggest part of my life. But sometimes there is something that we forget, and that's that the food is not only important because I love it or I like it, but it's important because it's just essential for life. So my project is related to that important part of life, and that's food. My title is Community Food Education with Local Food Pantries. First of all, I would like to begin my presentation by defining what's food pantry. So food pantry is a distribution center where family members and also individuals, they can come, they can be shelter or non-shelter, and they will receive food. The food pantries, many people, they get confused with food bank. But food bank is a larger organization center where they supply the food to the food pantries. And even though they're smaller than a food bank, they still feed hundreds of people per week. Now, there is the why. Why do I pick this topic? Or why did I start this project? One of the reasons is about a year ago during a summer, I was someone who benefited from the services that the food pantry was offering in this place around the area. During that time, I discovered how much important these services are for the community around. And even more than what you can imagine, there are more people going there every single month to get food to feed themselves and their family. So now, I was thinking about it, and then I realized it's not only what you eat, but it's also how you eat it. I might not be able to change the world in a couple of months, but I realized I can change a little bit the community that I am surrounded by. Let's go a little bit more in details about the numbers, the background of this project. According to Feeding America organization, 44 million people in the United States are food insecure. That means that they don't have enough or adequate food supply. And 42 million people turned to food programs in 2023. 13 million children in the United States are food insecure, and 100% of US counties have food insecurity. Let's see another chart. According to the USDA, it says there was an increase of price of many components, and one of them, it was food. From 2019 to 2023, mainly also affected because of the COVID pandemic, but food was the number 2 component among the other things, and it was the number 1 in speed, most rapidly increasing in the couple of years. So how did I do this project? First of all, I'm working with the SDA Church in Auburn, food pantry. I gather all the data for a couple of months. I started from September 2023. As you can see here in the slides, there are different types of food. There are canned products, frozen, fresh, and I just put everything and I started analyzing the data. The first thing I did is to put everything in one list so I can see what are the foods that are provided the most every month. That's the one that you can see next to it. That's from September 2023 to February 2024. The ones that are in red means they are the top ones, the most common ones. I did another graph with the top ones, and you can see that mixed vegetables are one of the top ones, rice long grain, and we have spaghetti sauce, almonds, and there are some non-vegetarian option as well, such as chicken and salmon. Since they receive the supply from food bank, they cannot really say, I'm gonna give this or not this other thing. But in my project, I'll be only using the vegetarian options. The results. Based on those lists and the data that I was analyzing, I developed recipes which had not only the recipe ingredients and the procedures, but also nutritional value, educational information of the main ingredient. And lastly, I'll be making demonstrative videos to provide a comprehensive education. These are the examples of the recipes I made. They are all within 30 minutes because my aim is to do fast, easy, and healthy. These are the videos that I've been recording thanks to New Start and Mr. Greg. They allow me to use the kitchen, and I'll be recording there. They're right now in process of being edited, and they will be soon done by the end of the semester. So, conclusion. The food pantry's goal is to provide food items to vulnerable families, right? But I realized that they do not have enough information or resources to teach them how to cook something. So I would like to fill that gap, providing the resources and the materials that I am developing so they can have a healthy, nutritious vegetarian food recipes so families can become more healthy, and they can achieve that goal of a healthier lifestyle. I would like to leave you with this quote. It is not only what you eat, but how you eat it. These are the resources. And thank you so much. Do you have any other questions? I did when I was recording it, but they're gone by now. I can try to.
Thank you, Isabella. I wondered if you could explain what a TFAP kit is.
Yeah, so a TFAP, I also wondered the same thing when I received the list, and that's the emergency food supply. So this is not provided every month, but the Placer Food Bank is the one who gives once in a while, like an emergency TFAP, that is an additional kit of food besides the one that is provided by the Placer Food Bank as a monthly supply. So it's just additional food that they call it TFAP because it's not always there.
Any other question?
Would this be distributed to other, these recordings that you make would be distributed to other food pantries or just to Auburn?
Yeah, so I've been already working with I've been talking with some other food pantries. And for now, I have the Auburn SA Church, I have the Colfax one, and I have some non-Adventist food pantries as well, such as Salvation Army and Interfaith Food Pantry. So for now, it's about 4, but I'm willing to still have these resources and share with whoever would like to utilize it.
Thank you, Isabella. Oh, one last question.
So the food that you collect is from the pantry themselves, is that correct?
Correct. So it's real, whatever I'm doing. I'm literally getting the food from the food pantries. I go there, receive the food, and cook it. So whatever the video I was showing you, those 2 samples, everything was based on the food that I received probably a couple of days ago from the food pantry myself. There are some additional things that I needed to buy, like salt or some oil that they don't always have it, but most of them, they're from the food pantries.
All right, thank you so much. Please remember to send Pastor Don an email of the food.
Thank you.
Our next presenter, Tristan. His topic is assessing the physical, mental, and spiritual health of students following the True Education model.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I do want to discuss with you Ellen White's True Education model. So, sorry. Okay. Ellen White proposes in her book, Education, this. Oh, I went too far. True education means more than pursuing a certain course of study. It has to do with the whole person and with the whole period of existence possible to human beings. It is the harmonious development of the physical, mental, and spiritual powers. That's what Ellen White proposes. That one of the hallmarks of following the true education model is the development of these 3 things. Now, Weimar claims to follow this model. They follow the model of true education. So for me, this is a perfect population group to study to see if this Ellen White's hypothesis is true. So I'm assessing physical, mental, and spiritual powers, right? And I took the liberty of defining what this actually means. So to assess physical health, I asked students how they perceive their lifestyle habits. To assess their mental health, I asked them to rate their joy and satisfaction in life. And to assess their spiritual health, I asked them to rate their perceived belief or confidence in the existence of God, 2, their perceived relationship with God, and 3, their willingness to share about God. And the results I did, I found that the only significant thing that changed following their before and after attendance at Weimar University was their willingness to share about God, share their personal testimony. And this was with 73 responses, so thank you for everyone who participated. But here I have the graphic on the screen. You can see that before attendance at Weimar University, it's about neutral. Students are relatively neutral in their willingness to share about God. After Weimar, that bumps up slightly. They're more willing to share about God or share their personal testimony. One of the interesting things that I noticed is that the number of semesters that the students spent at Weimar University did not influence the students' willingness to share. Another thing that I really wanted to sort of find out is what is the influence of peer groups on the physical, mental, and spiritual health of these students. And it turns out the friend groups before and after attendance at Weimar University significantly impacted lifestyle habits, satisfaction in life, and spiritual health as a whole. Yeah, so it impacted most things, and by significant I mean a p-value of less than 0.05. Particularly spiritual health was, I found some very low p-values, so there was very strong correlation in that regard. Students rated their peer groups, classes, and faculty subjectively as being very helpful for both physical, or all of physical, mental, and spiritual health. So subjectively, they found that physical, mental, and spiritual health improved, whereas objectively, maybe not so much as the data showed, but here's mental health, points above neutral, spiritual health. Now, one last thing that I wanted to explore a little bit. I wanted to explore specifically life satisfaction, because that is a large, or a very, it's a large indicator of sense of purpose in life. And you might hear this sometimes. I know Dr. Shin says this all the time, but the purpose in life comes from the tension between who we are and who we ought to be. So I wanted to see how these variables correlated with life satisfaction. So I ran a couple tests to assess the validity of the correlation, and I don't have the confidence in God's existence just because most students reported either a 6 or 7, which is very high confidence, so there wasn't enough spread of data to actually create a linear model. That's why I only have these 4 here, but you see here that the R-squared values, the degree of correlation between the variables is about weak to moderate, but you can see that before or after attendance, there is stronger correlation between the independent variables and the dependent variables, which is quite significant. So I think this is somewhat of a testament to the comprehensiveness of Weimar's education system, and it kind of unites our values into one central theme. Right, heal, hurt, and will. So moving forward, I would be very interested to see how this compares with other Adventist schools, number 1, and secular universities. I would just like to see how their physical, mental, and spiritual health compare versus that here at Weimar. And I would also like to find out, hey, maybe there's more or less interdependence of variables at Adventist schools or other secular universities than there is here. So that's just some of the stuff that interests me. So here we have Ellen White's true model for true education, the combination of the 3. And my hope is that God continues to bless Weimar University in the pursuit of true education. Thank you.
Any questions? All right. Thank you so much, Tristan. Next presenter this evening is Kevin Nacho, Evolution, a Godless Religion. Oh, that sounded like a statement. It's a question. A godless religion?
Well, it seems that you are part of the remnant. You are still here. Thank you. Just want to specify that I'm not a student in science, but a student in religion. And this study looks at the connection between science and religion regarding the understanding of evolution. My goal here is to demonstrate that even with a godless perspective, there can be a structure of religion, which is not normally what is claimed. It's more claimed as a theory. So first, I would like to define what is a religion. For Leonard Swindler, in the Dialogue for Interreligious Understanding, it's an explanation of the ultimate meaning of life and how to live accordingly based on some notion and experience of the transcendent. Religion is made of 4 different characteristics. First is teaching, how we explain life. Second is behaviors and rules, the custom and action that exemplify this teaching. The third one is the worship expression based on ritual and practices. And the fourth one is community structure, what is the connection and relationship between believers. There are different worldviews, and for maybe it's not so much talked of, but a worldview according to the Oxford English Dictionary is defined as a set of fundamental beliefs, values, determining or constituting a comprehensive outlook on the world. So worldviews help to interpret the reality around us. You have the reality, but it sounds mysterious to you. You need something to interpret it, and what you use is a worldview. You are here at the bottom of the slides, the 4 different worldviews. We used to be only in the biblical worldview, but that is actually for the age category 18 to 29 years old. Even in Christian realms, it's just 1% of the population. So there's other worldview, like the modern worldview, mixing science and reason. Then there is the postmodern worldview, which is insists on the relativity of truth, and the integrative worldview with this perspective in evolution and more individualistic approach of life. Charles Darwin, which is considered the founder of the evolution theory, says in his book, The Origin of Species, there is grandeur in this view of life. So if we summarize and re-explain it, it means that this is a view of life. So this is a worldview. So, but if we go back in time, in the 6th century before Christ, there was a Greek philosopher named Anaximander, and he formulated a theory that is very similar to evolution. He believed that life originated in the sea from the moist element, which was evaporated by the sun. He also believed that the presence of the shells and marine fossils was for him the proof that the sea covered much of Earth's surface. And finally, he postulated that humans must have originated in the sea and have originally resembled fish. That was contained in the book of Brian Bunch, The History of Science and Technology. Moving forward with Lord Monboddo, which is a very interesting name, 1714 to 1799. He was one of the scholars and a philosopher, and he studied the philosophers, the ancient Greek and Egyptian thoughts or mythology, as well as the mystery religions or cults of the Greco-Roman world. He also asserted that the Genesis story of creation and the fall man was for him just an allegory. He didn't take it literally. And so it's a matter of interpretation in that case. And he also did not base his understanding on revelation, but the source of truth would be for him more a natural religion that will come from nature. And then we come to the grandfather of Charles Darwin, Erasmus Darwin, which was actually a Freemason, as like Lord Mombodo that I just mentioned. He was also drew on the different secret societies, Eleusinian mysteries, Rosicrucian doctrines in his poetry, and he also based his understanding on the Greek and Roman mythology as well as mysterious religions. This is what the Freemason says about their understanding of the origins in the meaning of Masonry by Wilmshurst. They said, man who has sprung from the earth and developed through the lower kingdoms of nature to his present rational state has yet to complete his evolution by becoming a godlike being and unifying his consciousness with the omniscient, to promote which is and always has been the sole aim and purpose of all initiation. So we see in that part the impact of a type of religious system which is made of secret societies. So for those who may not be familiar, or for those who are, I just remind the main teaching or premises of evolution. First is variation. Not everyone has the same traits or genes, and they are not the same. Some are stronger or weaker than others. And there is a concept of inheritance, which means that there is a change in the inherited traits or genes of a population of organisms, which has started with plants, goes to animals, and go to humans in the perspective through successive generation. So it's the principle of heredity. And when living organisms reproduce, they pass on their progeny, a collection of traits. Then the mechanism, which is the heart of evolution, is natural selection, which means organisms that are more adapted to their environment are more likely to survive and then reproduce, which means pass on the genes that aid their success. And that way, over time, according to what evolutionists believe, the species would change and diverge from species to progress and become more complex. So there is behaviors and values. Many people have said that there is not, but actually there is, which are not the same than biblical worldview, which is a survival mode because you can be eaten at any time. It's also an individualistic perspective. There is a sense of randomness or chance. It's independent from God because the natural selection is a process that is by itself. We don't know exactly who is ruling it. There is also a principle of fear, which is we need to survive. And there is no free will. No man or creature is interact in the process. There is the law of the strongest. All creatures are subject to death. There is an absence of meaning and purpose and a relative morality that grows as the progress is maintained over time. And there is no hereafter, no promise of life after death. And I want just to give that last aspect of religion is the worship expression. It's very difficult to find clearly what it is because mainly evolution is not pictured as a religion, but there is a worship of nature in the sense that because plants and animals and humans are all in the same process, then evolutionists see animals and plants as brothers, as something that you can relate to as you would do to humans. And because of that, they relate to nature in a very different way that you and I do. And their respect is close to a respect of they would have for a human. And that brings the aspect of pantheistic approach, which the evolutionists are not the only one. There are many religions before. We mentioned the Greeks as well as the Egyptian, as well as the Eastern religion, animism, etc., that have this same pattern. So we can see that similarity. And I would conclude just with that. The ancient pagan evolutionism declares that the essence of paganism, old and new, is that the universe is eternal or timeless for some religion, that its motion are without beginning and without end, and that belief in creation out of nothing is very opposite of paganism. And so Thomas Huxley, more recently, he wanted to expel theology from science on the principle that scientific truth must be proved by science alone. So he split a religion, at least biblical religion, from science. And here is just a compilation of what evolutionists over time have declared about evolution, and you will see that there are many references to a religion. An evolutionary dogma, a satisfactory faith, man's worldview, all-pervading process, the whole of reality, metaphysical belief, a scientific religion, the myth of evolution, anti-knowledge, reveal truth, and illuminating light, and a storytelling. Here's my references, and I would be happy to answer your question if you have any.
Any question?
Do you think evolution would be better entitled evolutionism?
I think that would be a step moving forward in the terms of philosophy and more religion. But a lot of people don't recognize that evolution is a religion. For them, it's just a theory and a philosophy that exclude religion and is just solely on science. And I think that is a deception based on what I've demonstrated. And so that would be a good correction.
So I saw one of your references was Stanley Jacques. Did you read much in him? Did you read his book, The Origin of Science and the Science of Its Origin?
No, I read portions of it. I didn't read the whole book.
And, you know, so I think seeding the ground in any way in terms of science goes to the evolutionary side is something he strongly attacks and gives pretty good reasons why that's not true. Anyway, I just wondered if you had considered that in your considerations.
No. Well, that would be a good reading.
There being no more questions. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thank you.
I'd like to give special thanks to our session chairs, Dr. Opia and Dr. Harris, for keeping everybody on time. And I would like to thank all the speakers, Dr. Ratsara, to be Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Dweichin, Pastor McIntosh. He tried to behave, but he tried the scholarly thing, but it didn't work. He just got into evangelist, pastor. But it was very interesting talks. I'd like to thank Alec. It was a wonderful talk. Ellen, Emily, Tristan, Isabella, and Kevin. Each of you presented wonderful topics, and I think you need to push that a little bit forward. And if you're not going to do it, encourage your juniors to continue your study. Ellen, continue that study. That's very useful. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Martins, the chair of music, for the faculty recital. All right, I thank all the remnant of the remnant here.